We worked quickly with their technology team to integrate all the connections to get merchant fulfillment stood up. We did all the testing, launched on Prime Big Deals Day, and from there through end of Q4, they did about 3 million in sales just on FBM. So that's 3 million sales that they most likely would not have captured had they not implemented FBM.
Welcome to Top of Search with Robin and Abe, where we talk about e-commerce, Amazon, and more.
Welcome to the show. Today, I've got somebody that I'm so excited that we're going to be talking to. Matt Snyder he's just brilliant. And I love talking with him and chatting with him. He was formerly in-house at Veridesk, and now he has his own agency that is just doing really great things. And so, Matt, thank you so much for coming on the show today.
Robin, hey, thanks for the invitation. I've been excited, looking forward to this recording. So happy to be here.
Can you tell us a little bit about how you got started with Amazon?
Absolutely. So the jersey behind me has a little bit to tie into this. I always start with my Dirk Nowitzki jersey because where my career started is actually with the Dallas Mavericks. And while I was working with the Dallas Mavericks, Mark Cuban kept talking about this new crazy startup based here in Dallas here called Woot.com. And so if you're an early e-com person, you know what Woot is. And it was this daily deal website that was phenomenal growth. So I joined and ran the marketplace partnerships for Woot.com. We were acquired by Amazon in 2010. So worked at Amazon for about 3 years. From there, I co-founded another company called Accommodate. And what we did with Accommodate is we helped other brands market and sell their products on Groupon, Woot, and their daily deal sites. While it was a great success, I saw that Amazon was just dominating the space. And so kind of shifted my focus into Amazon exclusively. And that's where I joined the team at Veridesk, which was a really highly successful direct-to-consumer brand. They had been kind of struggling a little bit in terms of trying to find their way into Amazon. I joined the team in 2017, led their Amazon marketplaces where we did 8-figure business for all 7 years that I was there. And one of the things that I did that was unique there was Seller Fulfilled Prime. And for us, being a large, bulky, high-priced product, it was really a game changer and a really strategic advantage that we had being an Amazon seller. So today I started Brands Excel last year. And one of the things that led me to start this agency was just talking to other brands, other people in my position. There was a lot of resources out there that helped them with things like Amazon Media, product pages, so forth, like all the foundational services of like a Amazon provider out there. Where they struggled was more of the internal conversations. So dealing with their operations team, dealing with their finance or technology team, and helping to get that buy-in from those other department heads to then help them make the business on Amazon continue to scale, be more efficient, and so forth. So we started Brands Excel. We're a full service agency. We do all the media and all those fun things. But where I'd say we're different is we lean in and help brands on that first part of the business operations and that could be from forecasting, from revenue and media to inventory projections and so forth, or even API connections. So we're kind of a little bit unique in that way. And then I say once we get all those kind of core competencies in a good place, then we have the fun part, and that's Amazon Media. Abe is way smarter than me in Amazon Media, so we're not even go there today. But those are the fun parts of Amazon.
I gotta tell you, I don't know that that's necessarily the case. If you remember, the first time we met, you were up on the stage at Prosper Plus, and we sort of knew each other. But when I saw you on stage talking about how you leveraged promotions rolling into Prime Day, that was super, I learned a lot about what was possible with pre-scheduling and warming up audiences and leaning into audiences afterwards. That was a very, very insightful day when it came to media.
That's what I love about those events, Abe. And actually, Robert and I met at Prosper as well a few years ago prior to that, and through a mutual friend. And we all compete in this space. But at the same time, I feel like the more that we just lean in and help each other and share insights and learnings, the more we all win. Ultimately, we'll all compete against Amazon, right? So the more that we can all help each other with our own businesses, brands, agencies, whatever you want to call it, I feel like the more we share, the more we all gain.
I think we literally have had multiple conversations about this, but there sort of is a reality in which the mechanics and the basics of Amazon are pretty straightforward. And anyone that claims to have a magic wand or a very special sauce is usually hiding a piece of what's really happening. And what I see is if you do the basics, you'll be like 95% ahead of everybody. there's no super wizard. There's little sketchy people and stuff, but there's no super wizard that knows much more than anybody else. I don't think.
And I tell people, like, when somebody's telling you that, that's where you should probably be a bit more cautious and ask a lot more questions, because they're promising you the world. Like,
and I've lost bids to people who are like, well, they're promising me X, Y, and Z results. And I'm like, well, that's why you should run, because Amazon has too many variables. You can't promise results. Anybody who tells you they can't, either they're being willfully like obtuse, or they just don't have enough experience to know all of the variables that are there.
Yeah, there's a whole world of people who live off 6-month engagements, and they just look for the next person to fill that 6-month space, but it's not sustainable. So listen, I think we're all on the same page when it comes to offering value and when it comes to doing things correctly. I imagine, Matt, that you have a pretty similar playbook when it comes to a lot of the basic stuff. But, our conversation today is supposed to lean a little bit towards FBM and towards seller fulfilled prime, and even just the FBA parts of operations. And that is probably fair to say is one of your wizardly magic wand pieces of expertise. For a brand that is already on Amazon and thinks they have shipping into Amazon as fixed and set part of their system, would you say that it is possible to reimagine how they're handling their fulfillment and get an extra piece of value? Or is it sort of the basic FBA model is really simple?
Well, for anyone who's sold long enough at Amazon, nothing is simple about FBA. Now, I will say that for the most part, FBA has been the game changer for many brands as they get started on Amazon. To have a solution where you can use one, in some cases, same day, next day delivery, that would be very hard for most brands to stand up or even utilize a 3PL efficiently to provide that. So from that perspective, I would say 90% of the time, FBA is going to be the right solution for brands and their specific products. I think it's just we're at a point where brands need to start rethinking their strategy beyond Amazon, beyond FBA, and how does logistics and operations fit into that? Is where we have found, like, in some of the brands we worked with, the operations has been probably the biggest hindrance in their growth, but it's also been the biggest impact to their profitability. Or here's how FBM can be a supplement to support FBA long term, or where we do come have the opportunities for seller fulfilled prime of, we actually feel like we can provide the same level of service as FBA, sometimes better, and do it more cost effectively. And that usually is a big shock to sellers who've been selling Amazon for a long time and think that FBA is always going to be the best. Generally it is. There's certainly opportunities where our seller fulfilled prime can be better. And then it opens up the opportunities to offer the same service on your Shopify page, Walmart.com, Target, and so forth. And that's really kind of some of the game changers that brands get surprised by when we start talking to them about exploring beyond FBA.
Yeah. So are you actually shipping orders for the brands you work with, or are you telling them how to do it?
So we do not operate as a 3PL, so I don't have a warehouse. Would not want to get into that business myself, but we have partnered with a few different 3PL partners out there, and generally kind of help guide brands into making that decision. One is let's do a cost analysis of helping understand, is this product even viable for seller fulfilled prime? And if so, then who are the best partners out there? There's definitely a limited number of 3PL solutions out there that I would say can actually offer seller fulfilled prime, and those that do a very good job of it. But just like, we're 3 agency owners, we all offer a slightly different flavor or style. Same thing with your 3PLs. They all offer a little different value adds. And so it's making sure you kind of align your product and brand with the right 3PL provider as well too.
And one of the things I was most excited about was for most products, like you really do have to have FBA. But you had this really great case study of how a brand used seller fulfilled prime and merchant fulfilled. I think that especially because of all of the changes that Amazon's been making with shipments and placement fees and all of that, where previously we wouldn't even have talked about this as much, but there might be a really new place, just kind of like how there was at the beginning of COVID, a new place for seller fulfilled prime and merchant fulfilled. And would you feel comfortable sharing a little bit of that case study with us?
Yeah, absolutely. So I'll keep the brand quiet just because don't necessarily have their permission to share all the details, but I will say that this is a D2C brand. Everybody knows the brand name. huge D2C and large 8-figure business on Amazon. They've been growing massively over the last few years. This brand has a lot of big presence on D2C, their own retail, as well as Amazon. So when you have a person who sits outside of the Amazon ecosystem and they're doing forecasting and product planning, they don't understand or know all the different factors that goes into replenishing with Amazon. And so what we often see is they're always behind on inventory planning, right? They're never ordering enough. They're never accounting for sales growth fast enough on Amazon. So just as the media side is hitting optimal performance, the product goes out of stock. Now we're waiting here for 30 days, trying to frantically get product back in, then trying to spend more money on the media side to get back to where we were at. So that the brand asked about merchant fulfillment. We're like, we weren't even going to talk about Seller Fulfilled Prime yet. Let's just see if we can get merchant fulfillment in place so that when product comes in, we can instantly get it back onto Amazon. We can kind of close up this gap between, once we get it, then it's got to get received. It's got to get back into FBA. We're missing these precious sales days during peak season. There was also this challenge then with them of, do we want to fully commit this inventory to Amazon? Again, they're more profitable selling on Shopify or the other retail channels. So when they commit that inventory to Amazon, then they're pulling it out of these other sales channels. So that's the other kind of advantage that FBM or self-fulfilled can bring to brands as they go beyond Amazon, is having that leverage to say, okay, we're getting low on this product. Should we shift it away from Amazon and to these other more profitable sales channels? So those were kind of the factors going into the project with them. So we worked quickly with their technology team to integrate all the connections to get merchant fulfillment stood up. We launched literally on the day did all the testing, did the launch on Prime Big Deals Day. And from there through end of Q4, they did about 3 million in sales just on FBM. So that's 3 million sales that they most likely would not have captured had they not implemented FBM during that peak season to account for either low inventory products that they would not have otherwise put into FBA, or inventory that would not have been able to, right? We all know that if you don't have inventory in by early October, like, you're not getting it in during peak season. So it was a huge revenue saver for them. Now they had enough that they kind of got through the peak season, pulled back, let's reevaluate. Does Seller Fulfilled Prime fit in this? Does it not? I think there's a couple unique cases for them where it does, but that's one really good example for them. This wasn't we're going all in on FBM or Seller Fulfilled Prime, but we saw a specific challenge that they were facing on the peak season where we could quickly implement it, and it generated a huge return for them. So that's one good example. We've got others where we've gone through and done the cost analysis, and it's becomes a full-time switch just because of cost savings that we can do these comparisons. But that's one here recently that was a huge win for us and for the brand.
So with my experience with Seller Fulfilled Prime and my brands that work with it, there's typically two types of brands that work well. Number one is very expensive products, sort of like jewelry, where you want to have control over the shipment and over what you get and what the shopper gets and timeframes. And the other thing is large and bulky products, similar to what you were selling at Veridesk. In both of those cases, the control and the security and the savings and fees ends up being worth it. But outside of those, are there others where it's a clear win, or is this something which is available to a lot of brands to take advantage of? Or is it a small selection where the cost benefit is worthwhile?
So you named two very typical ones, the high value. And I think high value is going to become even more prominent here on SFP or FBM with the new changes of FBA reimbursements. Give us your COGS, or we're going to determine your COGS for you and give you an evaluation. The other ones we see is like seasonal trends. So one seller we talked to with, they actually sell holiday decorations. So Christmas trees, wreaths, things like that. Again, large bulky products, but also seasonal. And so where they have to then come in and right, they don't want to have a bunch of inventory left in FBA at the end of the season as well too. So seasonal type of products. Slow movers, if you have products that you're concerned about storage fees or so forth, would be another one. And then the other, where going back to the first client that I was just mentioning earlier, one of the things we were proposing to test with them was bundles. So they have a much higher AOV on their website because of the checkout experience that they have, where it's like, buy these products and hey, if you spend another $20, you're going to get $15 of savings, all those kind of it's the gamification. You can't do that on Amazon. But there are ways for us to kind of take those learnings of those bundles that work on their D2C, do those bundles through FBM or SFP, test those, see that does it work? And once we know what works, then we move that into FBA to make it profitable.
And I kind of feel like I tell a client, and I would love to hear if you think that I'm wrong. Feel free to, but I kind of tell people too, like if your product is a unique selling point, you have a lot of brand affinity, then having merch and fulfilled is like if you're a commoditized item, if you're just a spatula going up a bunch against another 5,000 FBA spatulas, then it's not going to work as well as if there's something that would cause the consumer to be okay with that extended delivery time.
That's a great point. And I think that even as you're kind of thinking through the comparisons, yes, if you're just a commodity product and your brand isn't going to stand out from everything else on the search page, then that Prime badge is very, very critical and important to have. In this case, if you have you can write off your brand recognition and brand demand, that does give you some, say, like leeway in terms of not having Prime.
But with that, like, it's like with great power comes great responsibility, right? Because, sometimes we have brands that are like, look, we really don't want to deal with FBA. And maybe even they do have that brand affinity. We had a clothing company that had a similar seasonality issue. And so we did do merch and fulfill for them. But what's really important then is they really have to be aware of what the requirements are for shipping and how little grace there is. I don't know if you want to talk a little bit about that and how your brands handle that.
So that's usually one of the kind of bigger challenges the brands have as they look into merchant fulfillment or self-fulfill Prime. Most times they're not going to have their own warehouses. So then, do we need to get a 3PL partnership stand up? And if so, does 3PL have carrier rates that we can use? You have Amazon buy shipping services. So there's a couple different routes. And I would say, again, going back to each brand's going to be a little bit unique and different. So as we go through and look, well, first, you can use Amazon buy shipping services. The value there is just as when you go to checkout, like if you ever done merchant fulfillment, you can go into the order details. Amazon gives you a list of all these USPS, FedEx, UPS, so forth. You can select it, right? That's Amazon buy shipping services. One of the things that brands often don't know is that you can use Amazon buy shipping services and bill third party. So you can bill to your own carrier accounts or to your 3PL's accounts and use their rates. Plus they get the advantage because the advantage here is they use the Amazon buy shipping services. If your product is, say, delivered late or there's some type of delay in your shipment and the customer goes and leaves a bad seller review, Amazon will remove that if you've used Amazon buy shipping services. So we always advise brands to use that, even if you're going to do your own carrier accounts or your 3PL accounts, just to get that added seller protection from Amazon.
Let me ask you, going back to who this works for, is there a sort of fee threshold where it becomes worth it? I mean, for many years, FBA has always been by far the cheapest way to fulfill anything. It's not so clear every time these days, but for many years, you could not get packages across the country for any fraction of what Amazon would charge you within their fees. So these days, it still costs a lot to ship things around the country, especially once you hit any kind of significant size. Dimensional weights destroy all the shipping charges. So how close is the matrix between our own shipping charges or a seller's own shipping charges versus what Amazon is charging in fees? Does Amazon still have the advantage most of the time, or is it close and worthwhile for sellers?
And part of that response, I would say, when your product gets above $50, say 20 pounds, that's when other rates outside of Amazon could become more advantageous than what you're getting on Amazon.
It's interesting. $50, I would have thought it would be much higher than 50, but you're saying at $50 value, it becomes worthwhile, or
that's where it
becomes worthwhile?
Yeah, that's where it starts.
You have to balance it with the dimensional size of it too, right?
Yeah.
So if it's a $50 item that's the size of a door, then no, but.
Yeah, you're right. I would say $100 is usually the sweet spot, but I'd say we kind of start around the $50 range. And then kind of depending on the size is a big factor for that as well too.
So a lot of the small and light stuff might not be worth fulfilling. Small/light/cheap is probably going to be very tough. If you're selling underwear or t-shirts, FBA is really going to be still the place for now.
It would be tough. Again, in the case that I shared earlier, they were an apparel brand. And so for them, the cost was about the same we're using USPS was their primary carrier that we used. So the rates was very comparable to what Amazon was going to be offering. The two partners that I would generally recommend. So there's one called DaVinci Micro Fulfillment. So they've got, what's unique with them is they own all their locations. They've got, I think, 6 to 7 locations now across the US. They have their own carrier relationships as well too. So in these cases where we've come to them and we've actually done some cost analysis with some of our brands, again, more on the bulky, heavier side, they actually have 8 times out of 10 beaten the prices that we have from FBA. And in this case, now we're offering SFP not just to Amazon, we're offering it on the D2C page. We're doing other omni-channel solutions for them as well too. So that's really where like the value starts to kick in, something like a DaVinci. The other is Where to Go. And what's unique with them is they're actually owned by UPS. So they have great rates. They have a pretty good understanding of that. Have also the logistics solutions being a UPS company.
Do they only ship post office, by the way? Is that the drawback?
So it's UPS. So the benefit there is like they do allow you to bring other carriers. And it's actually a great question, Abe, because working with them, one of the brands we are working with, the challenges we kept coming up with on the SFP side is you have these called speed performance metrics, and you have to have certain 1 day, 2 day coverage for all 7 days of the week. And where UPS does not deliver on the weekends, that creates a problem. So we actually had to supplement FedEx with their service in order to hit those speed performance metrics. So yes, they do what they're primarily UPS services. They do have kind of that flexibility of bringing FedEx or USPS to supplement.
So that actually sounds like many brands, if not most brands, do really have this as an opportunity they might not be taking advantage of.
They do. I would say the considerations, if you're thinking just merchant fulfillment, right, that's a pretty quick, talk to a 3PL, you work out the details, probably low end 30 days to 60 days, you should be able to kind of get things set up and running. Seller Fulfilled Prime is a different story.
So that actually leads me to a question about Seller Fulfilled Prime. With Seller Fulfilled Prime, the brands I've worked with are fulfilling themselves and they have to go through an approval process. There's a test for X amount of days where you have to ship orders at a certain speed to prove that you can be eligible for it across your account. Now, with these brands using a fulfillment service, do they have to go through the same enrollment process? Or is it good enough to say, hey, I use these guys, and Amazon says, oh, we know these guys, you're approved? Is it sort of like the former or the latter?
So Amazon still treats every brand as their own seller account. So it doesn't matter if you're working with, say, a DaVinci or Where to Go or whomever. Amazon's still going to make you as their brand because this SFP is assigned to your specific seller account. So you still have to go through the pre-qualification, which is 100 orders within 90 days of just merchant fulfillment. Then you can enroll in the SFP trial period, which is another 100 orders within a 30-day trial period. And then you have to, essentially you're hitting the exact SFP requirements for 30 days with no Prime badge. Once you get through that, then you're enrolled in the SFP program.
And that's usually where I think brands are like, basically have to do all the work is for Seller Fulfilled Prime without the benefits of Seller Fulfilled Prime. So it's not going to be, you're going to have this dip in profitability, right? Where you're trying to force these conversions a little bit. And so you have to be prepared for that. I think that especially when we're trying to decide how many SKUs are you going to transition, you also have to think about, we have to have enough to meet that threshold for SFP.
And Amazon says that you don't have to, during your trial test periods, it doesn't have to be your full catalog. It can be a single product, right? And so now the speed performance, as we kind of shared earlier, 1 day, 2 day, and at 3 days is based upon your product size tier, which is standard, oversized, extra large. We would tell you, don't use standard products for your test. Use oversized, and if possible, use extra large, because again, you can do with 1, 2, or how many products you need to in order to make it work. But make it as simple as you can. So fewer products, bigger, bulky, are definitely more advantageous to get you through that trial period. And then to your point, Robin, then we can start thinking through what's the phased approach to bring in these products through a phased approach versus all at once.
I think just kind of like with anything we're testing, we don't want to go all on black until we've tested it, because you might find that, your fulfillment team just can't keep up with the orders, or we can't keep up with the speeds. I know you with that one brand that you shared, you were under a tight timeline, so you probably had to move things pretty quickly. But usually we're going to say, let's test and make sure that this is going to work so we don't get the account suspended for late shipments.
You're right. And I'll be candid, like once you get through this trial period, the tension doesn't stop. This is something where, again, picking the right partners is really critical because
getting the approval is no guarantee of keeping the approval.
Yeah. So it kind of changed here recently. You know, Amazon used to do this. They would send you, you know, maybe you get kicked off, you have to do a plan of action, and then they would put you back on. They've moved away from there, and now you have kind of this 3-strike policy within 30 days. But you just, you know, as the seller, with any business, you have to be very proactive of making sure that you're mitigating issues or potential impacts to the customer performance. So, right, there's hurricane season down the southeast. Well, make sure you're aware of that and watching that, so that if something happens there and you need to take that region off of Prime, you do so. Or there's a snowstorm that hits the East Coast and FedEx is going to be closed for 2 days. Well, then get your Prime turned off. Those are the type of things that sellers, like, you just got to be mindful and taking those proactive steps to mitigate those impacts. And even with that, right, we've seen it where you can, as the seller and even the 3PL, can do everything right, and the carrier messes up, and that's just completely out of your control. I've heard rumors that Amazon may be making some changes to this in terms of taking less off of the actual delivery and more on when you make the shipment, because that's where you as the seller and the 3PL actually have more control. They haven't fully announced that, but I've heard some rumors there may be some changes that'd be more beneficial to us as the sellers.
So you mentioned one thing about taking off zones and changing delivery times and things like that. That leads me to think about an interesting option. Are there cost calculations that factor in distance? And if you're doing a cost calculation that factors in different distance, is it more open to brands to enroll in these programs with a radius that's closer to them? So if somebody doesn't want to pay to ship to California and they say, listen, I'm going to let FBA ship everything that's more than 3 states away, costs too much, Amazon's going to take care of it, but I want to have a seller fulfilled Prime to fill those gaps for people who are closer to me and the shipping is worthwhile. Is that an option? Is that something that people do?
It's a little more challenging today. That used to be kind of the model a lot of sellers used back in the early days to sell fulfill Prime, is they would only offer Prime in a very small region. And Amazon didn't like that experience. They want the customer to have that Prime experience nationwide. So if your product is standard size, you have to offer national coverage. So it would not work for a standard size product. If you're oversized or extra large, Amazon will allow you to have more limitations in terms of how far you offer services from your shipping locations.
Got it. So they're not going to require you to send a desk from one coast to the other in 2 days.
Not technically. Where it gets a little challenging on that is when, so in most cases, all of our partners we have they're shipping from 3 or 4 or 5 locations across the U.S. Where it becomes kind of problematic is you would think that Amazon would have the logic of, okay, I have a warehouse in Atlanta. Amazon's only going to service that Atlanta region. No, I mean, there has been times where we're past the order cutoff times, but you have product in Nevada. Amazon says, okay, well, you can ship from Nevada. No, but that is where going into, again, to your shipping templates. One of the things we work with brands then is helping them think through how do we set your templates in a way so that it reduces the impacts you would have to shipping up, say, a desk from cross country for an overnight, because that's never going to be profitable for anybody. So,
got it. So if a brand is listening to this, like they're listening to this podcast, we're talking about distances, we're talking about weights, we're talking about different warehouses, and there's a lot to ingest, and it might not be super clear, what fits where. If a brand is listening to this and they say, how do I know what to do? If I have this seed of the word fulfillment in my head, what do I do with that seed? Could you give us the bullet points about what their process for evaluating and taking action is?
So we'll start the easy level. If your brand has been in a position the last 6 to 12 months where you have had stockouts from inventory that has lost you revenue, you should first at least take into consideration what's my process for planning for inventory forecasting, and could FBM, just basic FBM, be a stopgap that I can use to help recover that down period before I can get inventory back to FBA. If that has occurred, then you should at least be stopping and thinking about how do we solve for that and reduce our risk. If your product then, say more, if your product fits in the qualifiers of high value, bulky, overstocked, or seasonal, if you find kind of one of those three scenarios, then it's first doing the cost analysis. I've done several of these. Do you have a 3PL partner at all? If you don't, obviously then the timelines of these gets a little bit more because there's some things to work through. But if your total FBA cost, I would say, on these products is north of 38%, then there's probably room for you on the SFP side to bring that down.
So that's the fulfillment fees, not the commissions, not the cost of goods. If your fulfillment fees are more than 38%, then there is very likely room for it to be done less expensively than Amazon's doing it for you. If somebody has been listening to and they look at their business and they say, I've been losing money because I run out of stock, or I have a type of product that fits into these situations, or when I look at my cost structure, I'm giving Amazon more than 38% of my total sale price in fulfillment fees. What do they do next?
So if it's inventory, I'm sure you guys have something in place too, but we have created pretty comprehensive inventory forecasting. So with that tool, what we help brands walk through then is, so for 7-day trends, 30-day, 90-day, like we get very, very granular with this. Generally, the brands we're working with, we're sitting down with the brands internally and saying, okay, what time deadline do you need to account for production, lead time, everything, importing and so forth. There's usually, those are where the gaps are found of where brands are not having the right model or solutions in place, and that's where the problems are. So first, helping brands work through that. If you're more on the merchant fulfilled SFP side, it's sitting down, breaking down that cost analysis with you guys. And then from there, I could better align with you. Is it DaVinci is a better fit for you? Is it a Where to Go a better fit for you? And then from there, that their teams get involved with you guys and with the brand, helping them put together a go-to-market plan.
Cool. Robin, I think you had a question also, huh?
Yeah, because so we have a couple, we have a client that's Orthodox, and then we have a client that, they're in Nashville, but they take a lot of holidays off, which is good. I'm all for people giving holidays to their team. So can you talk briefly about the difference between merchant fulfill and SFP when it comes to allotting for everything from a religious holiday to a national holiday, because I think that's something people need to think about, especially if their team has a lot of those.
Great question. So Amazon posts its recognized holidays for FBA. Those are the same recognized holidays for you as a merchant fulfill or SFP seller. One or two options. If during those periods you want to just have your team off, simply go in, turn the Prime badge off, turn your merchant fulfillment off. Now, obviously, there's your costs of revenue to that. That's something you as a business owner have to decide. If you're using a 3PL, then obviously the advantage there is that 3PL continue to work during those days. And we would have this set up for you in a way that's automated. So sales are going straight to your 3PL. Nothing you as the business technically need to do during those periods. But this is actually why Amazon, when they made the changes, they extended the weekend services, made it that you can do this as a Saturday or Sunday. You just have to choose one. Because of religious days that for Orthodox, for example, Saturday is not an option for them, right? And so Amazon had to kind of give some leeway in there. So we're not going to make you do both, but you have to do one. So there's that flexibility. But again, that's going back to making sure you have the right 3PL partnership to help you. If you as a business want to have some extended holidays, have that Friday after Thanksgiving closed, make sure your 3PL is not. All right, you don't miss those big days.
Are there 3PLs that don't work every possible shipping day? I mean, I would have to imagine that that's table stakes for somebody being in this business.
I imagine every 3PL is more of where brands have their own warehouse operations and they're trying to do it themselves, where they kind of run into that challenge.
Yeah, we've run into that, and then making sure that their warehouse teams know, it doesn't matter if Amazon has to go out. If we're going to run out of capacity for that day and a website order for Amazon, the Amazon one has to go out, even though that seems counterintuitive. And if not, we need to reevaluate the whole thing.
Yeah, we actually had that with back at Veridesk, where we had to work with our operations team, even thinking through when they load up the FedEx truck, they're loading it in a way that all of our D2C orders go on the truck first, Amazon last. So the Amazon orders were the first to come off the truck and first to get scanned. So even things like that, where you always have to prioritize Amazon because of these very tight delivery performance windows you have to hit.
Yeah.
Went from wood to Veridesk, right? Or from wood to Vari. How does something like that work? How do you learn about a position like that? I always feel like people who work at Amazon or Amazon companies going into the outer world and vice versa is always super fascinating to me, because I look at it like the Amazon ecosystem is sort of closed, and getting into the bubble or getting out of the bubble, there's almost like a sort of a wall there. Did that exist for you, or was it just when you were ready that the opportunity came and it was smooth?
Good question. And
you don't have to say anything that's obviously, you don't have to reveal any trade or recruiting secrets or anything like that.
No.
Well,
I mean,
I'm
I wish
just
I
kind of
had.
tickled because I'm like imagining people in like orange bandanas, like the Blood, the Crips, and the Amazon people, like jumping people into their gangs with box cutters, But
Yes, with the box cutters and the tape guns.
Man. Oh, I wish I had like some secret sauce I could share, but I would say like kind of what we started the beginning of this podcast with around general networking and just getting to know more people, putting yourself out there, whether it's events or mastermind groups or whatever, getting your network as deep and broad as you can. So with my story was actually my entire career has been around. And so going back to the Dallas Mavericks, coming out of college, wanted to work there. I literally would contact the HR and sales director bi-weekly until the point I annoyed them enough. We're like, we'll give you a non-paid internship. So I showed up, worked my way into a full-time job, right? And so from there, again, I kind of shared earlier, was Mark talking about this new company. And so again, just kind of putting feelers out there, reaching out to using Mark as a way to get a contact, somebody at Woot to get that introduction. So when I came to Veridesk, as I mentioned, I actually left Amazon. So I was a co-founder of a company called Accommodate. So with Accommodate, we're pretty successful, and we were part of the Dallas our fastest growing companies in Dallas that year. So we came in 8th, and the company Veridesk came in 1st. And so during the award ceremony, CEO Jason McCann's giving his speech, and he shares that, hey, we want to give everybody here a free Veridesk. And I was like, man, it's fantastic. I've always wanted one of these things. I'm tall. I'm 6'4". I've already been like standing. I've been doing my own makeshift standing desk at the office. And so what I reached out to was, told him like, I'd love to just come by the office, meet you guys, pick up our products and so forth. I met Jason, and just on a whim afterwards emailed him, said, hey, here's what I know. Here's kind of my specialties. If there's ever a fit, I'd be very interested in having a conversation with you. 2 weeks later, get the email from him. We'd love to have a conversation. We were trying to figure out Amazon. Can you help us? Right? Came in and helped them. And it's been a great 7 years there. And even with starting the agency, it all came about of just having lots of conversations with other brands and seeing that the challenges I was having at Veridesk were the same challenges all these other brands were having. And seeing like, okay, there's thousands of agencies out here, but there's still some brands who are having this pain point that's not getting addressed. And that's, ultimately what led me to start this as well too. But going back, I've got a son who works in this space, and I've told him from day one, I was like, I'm not an extrovert. He's not an extrovert. But you got to learn to kind of act like an extrovert, and these going to a Prosper show or going to Amazon or whatever, because that's your opportunity to get in front of other brand leaders, or you never know who's there, right? So get yourself out there. Sit down, talk to the person next to you, because you never know where that conversation, where that relationship could lead to.
Yeah, I mean, listen, this podcast started exactly the way you described. I've known Robin for years at this point, but it was always on a very, superficial level. And we were at Accelerate, and we bumped into each other, and we had a better conversation than hello, how are you? And, X amount of weeks later, here we are. So yes, putting yourself out there and having those conversations really leads places. I'm like you. I'm an introvert. People are surprised when they hear that, but I very, very much crawl up in a ball after a 3-day conference and need to completely disengage. But yeah, doing that work is our responsibility as a business owner. If you want to succeed, all of life is some form of selling. That's it. Whether it's a direct actual transaction of selling a loaf of bread or a TV set, or whether it's selling ourselves as being capable to do a thing and wanting to do an exchange of services, Life is about selling things, and the better you get at it, the more you're going to succeed. You can actually be the best at a thing, but if the world does not realize it, you're in a trailer park doing your thing great.
Absolutely. And, I think the three of us all very similar to this, not being extroverted, being introverted, but I always tell my kids, like, learn to be comfortable feeling uncomfortable. Walking into a room, walking into a presentation, having all those nerves and saying, like, knowing that this is normal. It's normal to feel this way. It's not unique to me. Be okay with it. I'm sure I like to tell a story of, if you've been to a Prosper event, we've all probably gone to the Rich Goldstein parties, which are just jam-packed of like the who's who of everybody on LinkedIn and everybody else. So walking in those parties can be a little overwhelming. And I felt many times.
Those are the definition of sensory overload.
Oh my gosh.
I'm so exhausted after those.
Like just preparing myself. All right, okay, Matt, it's time to turn your extrovert self on. Like for the next 3 hours, you got to be on. But look, it's again, you've got to put yourself in those situations and those environments, and this industry specifically, to really make sure your paths open up for new opportunities.
For me, even though I've been in the space for a really long time, there's still moments where I walk into a conference party or the lunchroom and I feel like a little bit like a middle schooler, like the first day of school, especially if you're like branching out into a space that you're not as familiar with. So the only way to get to the point where you like have that group of homies that you can hang out with is to have a lot of middle school lunch moments, I kind of think.
Yeah. So when you were nagging the Mavs to hire you, like how hard was that on your psyche when they're telling you no or when they're ignoring your messages? Like how many times did you have to ask before they even acknowledged you or gave you something?
So it was my senior year of being in college, and at the time, actually, I got married very young. I was actually married at the time, and so my wife and I, at the time, came down over our spring break, met with the sales director, and it's funny, like his name's Billy Weiner, and he's still a great friend of mine today. Basically sits down and he's just like, give me all the cold shoulder of like, look, I told you, like, we don't do internships here. I guess, we could look at trying to find something for you to do, but I don't know. And this was after I had, like I shared, I probably would email him or the HR person twice a week for probably 3 months at this point. And I thought I was very cutting edge at the time, where I sent them instead of just seeing my paper resume, I sent them my PowerPoint presentation about how unique and special I was as a marketing and salesperson. And so after we met at spring break.
Was it a good PowerPoint? Looking back? Well,
it was a good one, because actually on my last day there, the HR person actually came over and was like, hey, man, I thought you'd like to have this. He kept it. He said this is definitely one of the most unique and proposals and presentations, whatever, resumes that we ever received. And so he's like, it definitely got our attention here. I think, again, this was 2002 era, so a long time from now. But
how did you get focused on the Mavs? Were you always a fan, or were you a basketball fan or a Mavs fan, or did you want to get into sports? Like, what was the connection there? I mean, to the best of my knowledge, the Mavs are not a storied franchise. It's not like wanting to be awful. A Yankee fan or something,
At the time, they were at the bottom, So yes, I was a basketball fan. Growing up, was a big University of Kansas fan. So I went to University of Kansas, where I was dead set that I was going to be a walk-on basketball player.
Were you in school with Danny Manning?
No, but
I feel like the years are very close to overlapping.
He was close. Right? He's a little older than I am, probably about 8 years before me. But I know, actually, yes. Now that you mentioned him, I'll have to bring it out.
Wow,
that's my Danny Manning autographed.
What else? What else are you? Okay, what else are you hiding there? I need to know what other interesting things are there. Let's have the real presentation. Screw that PowerPoint.
Well, I've got over here. I got my Tony Gonzalez autograph ball, my Tom Brady football helmet. I do have quite the
selection.
Memorabilia.
Huh?
Yeah, I do. Love sports, but it was funny. So when I went to Kansas, I thought for sure I was going to work on the make it as a walk-on basketball player, which probably overstepping my abilities there. But I got to work in sports, so they're like, hey, you're not going to make it as a walk-on, but we need some help working in the athletic department. So that was my first step into working in athletics. And I knew that, okay, if I'm not going to make it as an NBA player, I want to work in the NBA. It was just that goal of like, I want to work in the NBA, and I want to find a way to make that happen.
College athletics was not where you were going to end up?
No, it definitely could have been, but I just the allure of professional sports. And shortly after that was like my senior year. Going into my senior year is when Mark Cuban had bought the Dallas Mavericks. And, at the time, Mark was like this over the top, very outspoken owner, like not your traditional NBA owner by any stretch. And he was doing all these like crazy, he would always make comments with the ref. And so like there's like this one time he would hire a ref to manage a Dairy Queen. And so like that week he actually went and worked and managed Dairy Queen, did this whole like PR marketing, and it was amazing. And so I saw these things that Mark was doing. I was like, that's the guy I want to go work for. I want to go learn from somebody like Mark Cuban. And so that was what was kind of the lure of the Dallas Mavericks and why I wanted to work there. And
yeah, it's funny. I actually heard Mark Cuban speak maybe 15 or 18 years ago. He was just doing like a talk for a community, a community group, and he was sat down for an interview in front of a couple of hundred people. And he was already the owner of the Mavs, but he wasn't the Shark Tank guy yet. He wasn't all of those things. And they spoke to him about his whole growing up and who he is and his family and stuff. And it really showed me a different side of who he is. He's got layers.
He does. And I can relate to a lot of his story of, everyone like to say like he just got lucky with this broadcast.com and selling to Yahoo at the right time. And but yeah, you hear his story and he's just always been this hustler, had this drive to prove people wrong or prove others that he's get outwork or outcompete. I tell my kids or people I know, like, I'm by far not the smartest person at any time in the room, but I know how to network and I know how to use the resources. I know how to outwork other people. And I think that's one of the things that obviously attracted me to working from somebody like him, but also learning a lot from him. He had all kinds of crazy sayings around the office of, did you get the check? Meaning like he uses a salesperson, like, yeah, I made the sale. Did you actually get the payment? Did you actually get a check? Because it's not a sell. Nothing is done until you get the check, right?
Yes.
Oh yeah, that's what I say here. A lot of times I'll be working with somebody and my team will want to get started working. I'm like, no. It is not confirmed until it's confirmed. The words don't mean anything. And I guess Mark Cuban thinks the same way. He's very smart.
The one that always chuckled me a little bit was his no balls, no babies.
Oh my God, you heard that also?
Yeah.
So the way I heard it, so I have had that saying in my head for 15 years. And he said, It takes balls to make babies.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm like, wow. As soon as he said that, like the switch flipped, and apparently he uses it in the office also. That's amazing.
Oh yeah. I mean, if you know the history of the Mavs, there was a little period of time there where it got a little too far, right? But I mean, yes, that was like the Markisms, as we said, were all over the place. But I think being a young college student and having aspirations of being an entrepreneur, having that influence was key to, kind of career path and success.
So is working for the Mavs almost the opposite of being an entrepreneur? I mean, you're really plugging yourself into a system. It's sort of the opposite of going out and doing a thing on your own.
You're absolutely right. I mean, that's ultimately why I left. It was a great experience for me going in, dream job. I was like, what an amazing experience to get to be connected with this team and these many great years of people like Dirk Nowitzki and Steve Nash and Michael Finley, and loved it from that perspective. And I could have stayed in that role and enjoyed it because of just the affiliation with the Mavericks and so forth. But I would always have had this itch and this thought back in my head of like, what else could I have done? And opportunity with Woot was, okay, here's a company that's growing really quickly. Clearly, this is the path of retail and commerce going forward. What better way for me to come in and learn than to jump in with a company like this? And gave me a front row seat of watching how web, at the time what everyone called Web 2.0, was getting established and launched, and then have the opportunity with Amazon. I probably at this point, looking back, say like I stayed too long on the traditional corporate side. But even my time with Very and Veridesk, I went there with the mindset of, I know Amazon really, really well. I want to understand, how does this whole other side of the business, from sourcing, inventory planning, product development, all these things that I never have really been truly exposed to that level. But I spent a lot of my time at Veridesk of just going and like getting to know the team who went to China every other month, or with the teams that were there, and understanding how do they think about product development, how do they think about inventory planning and forecasting. Like, I spent my time trying to make relationships with those people and understanding how they did their business. That's probably the most valuable thing I had from Veridesk, is just learning from all these other really smart people from completely things outside of Amazon.
So would you say that, it's funny because you mentioned obviously looking at different teams and getting the picture of everything they do. And at this point, or at least when you were with Vari, you have had experiences with Woot and with Amazon and the Mavs and, all of that whole path. Would you say that they are more alike or more different? What I mean is this. Every business that is successful typically has their own twist on how they became successful, whether it's a system that they implemented themselves, which is unique, or whether it's a drive, or whether it's an innovation or something. But everybody has something which makes them special. But at the same time, as I mentioned earlier, you sort of have to do all the things right. Would you say from everything you observed, all of those successful organizations were successful because they did all the right things, or were they more successful because they had an angle and they leaned into it?
Really good question.
That's like a nonsensical question, but like it seems to me, I always wonder about the nuts and bolts of what leads to success,
Yeah.
And can an undifferentiated product with perfect systems become successful, or could a unique product that's an absolute tornado of a disaster behind the scenes also become successful? What are the building blocks to what success looks like? And you get to see it at this point in completely different models of business.
So I would say, like, with both Woot and Veridesk, the owners and different markets came up with something new and very innovative that attracted a lot of attention. So with Woot, it was this new website, this experience. And again, if you never, back in the day, what Woot was is a daily deal website, but we literally start off with selling one product a day. So it could be, the iPhone case or whatever. Back in the day, like literally we'd sell one item, we'd write this really funny story about it, and you would come to read the funny story and maybe buy a product. But from that, through this, had over 1 million people who come to the website on a day. It was literally crazy what we could do there. But it started off with something very, very innovative. And at the time, I don't think that his name's Matt Rutledge, at the time, had this idea of what Woot would be, but he at least had this vision of like, this is something. Blogging was just getting kind of popular at the time. So he was working off of the blogging, like, okay, how could I take something that I know is trending, something I know that's old, and create something that's innovative and attractive to this gaming industry. And I think Jason McCann and founding team there with Veridesk was very similar. Like, their unique background. You'll love this, Abe. Robin, is the other company they have is called Jimmy. You've never heard of them, but you have everybody has their products. So the first product was the Big Mouth Billy Bass Talking Fish.
Oh yeah.
And then they created holiday yard inflatables. So everything you see at Christmas or Halloween or whatever, and the big inflatables, the big giant Santa in your neighbor's yard, you can thank Jimmy for those products. But again, found this industry, office furniture, that had been stagnant for a long time, used their resources, like this experience they had on this completely different side of the business, to come to a market with how can we create something unique and leading edge. I'd say the challenge in both scenarios, so both came up with like a really unique product, brought to market, had great success, but it's then the sustainability of those. And in both cases, you had Groupon, Living Social come on the scene with Daily Deal Market. You've had all these knockoff competitors, Asia sellers, and so forth on the Veridesk side. I think that was probably, in both cases, some good learning lessons of like, how do you, one, build up moats and defense around when you have found success and being innovative, but then two is like, always like hindsight's always 20/20, but what are the things like looking back, how could we have taken different paths or been continue the innovation? It's the continuing innovation that's the harsh part.
Right. The first at 1.0, the gleam in your mind is like easy. Yeah. Iterating and adding to the system is completely different.
It is, and it's very difficult to sustain. And where you look at companies like, say, a Nike, if you've read the book Shoe Dog or seen the story, it's helpful when you see this company today that is market leader, global recognition, and multi-billion dollars. But at the time, like, they've been in the same position where, I was at different times in my career with Veridesk or with Woot, and where we've had high growth and drops and everything. Like, that's the story of all these great companies. And it really comes down to like continue to drive and not rest on the success you've had in the past, and also finding those, like, what's the next innovative way that we can separate from our competitors. And that's true for all of us, even in what we do, right?
Yeah, no, that's the perfect lesson.
Yeah. I think it kind of goes back to like that being comfortable, being uncomfortable. Cause like I was being mentored for a while by this really amazing woman. And I was like, what if everything falls apart and I have to start all over? And she's like, well, you would never have to start all over because, you've been developing skills, you've been developing a network. You're always going to be starting at 0+. And so I think that for me, that took away the, like, if I fail, it's over, and kind of helped me re-add it as, and like, I've been surprised how many things from being a youth minister or working at Kinko's, things have actually really helped me in my business. So I think that, what you're sharing about like how you took from each thing as people are, if somebody's a brand and they're trying to figure out how to evolve, getting used to that being uncomfortable and building out that network can really be a powerful tool to keep moving you forward and, being able to overcome the inevitable failures that come.
Yeah. That's learning things from your experiences is like one of the other tenets of personal growth and of business success.
Matt, how else can people get in touch with you if they want to work with you or they want to follow you or they just want to stalk you?
So LinkedIn is always a great way. You can always reach me on there, message me on LinkedIn. I think we'll share the link here in the show notes. My email is matt@brandsexcel. That's just, it's brands with like Microsoft Excel, EXEL.com. Yeah, don't hesitate. I'm always happy to engage brands and just share, like we said earlier, always willing to share my experiences and help people out.
Amazing. All right. Listen, Matt, I really, I appreciate the time. It was really interesting learning about the things I knew a little bit about, but now I know a lot more about. And I look forward to the next time for sure.
I'm just really grateful for you taking the time to come on. You're an amazing person with amazing business ethics, and I love getting to know people like you. So thank you so much for being so generous in your sharing and for just being you.
Thanks, Robin. Thanks, Abe.
See you guys.
This has been another episode of the Top of Search podcast. We hope that you've enjoyed listening as much as we did recording, especially today with Matt.
Thanks for listening to the Top of Search podcast. Have a burning question you would like answered or a topic you would like featured in a future episode? You can submit it at topoffsearchshow.com. If you love the episode, subscribe and leave a review. Each month, we'll be selecting one reviewer to win a one-on-one call with your choice of Abe or Robin. Winners will be announced at the end of the first episode of every month.